Hey everyone, I'm Isaac and welcome back to Isaac Reviews 2024. Now, I love animated movies. They're part of the reason why I started making these videos, and one thing I always find interesting is when a director who's primarily known for working on animated films makes the transition to live action. Sometimes, like with Andrew Adamson, Brad Bird, and Phil Lord and Christopher Miller, they can do just as great a job with live action as they do with animation. But other times, like with Andrew Stanton, Chris Wedge, and Jennifer Yu Nelson, it doesn't end up going so well. And this brings us to the latest addition in animation veterans switching to live action with Harold and the Purple Crayon. Specifically, this is the live action directorial debut of Carlos Saldanha, one of the most important filmmakers from the late Blue Sky Studios who is responsible for bringing some of the studio's most iconic films to life. So now he's taking on a new medium with a feature adaptation of the beloved children's book of the same name, and honestly, I was not looking forward to this one leading up to its release. It just looked like another one of those generic early to mid 2000s flicks about a cartoon character traveling into the real world with wacky shenanigans ensuing from there. In fact, the film's producer, John Davis, also produced a lot of those sort of films back in the day. But I like to keep an open mind, so I went and saw Harold over the weekend. And while it wasn't as bad as I thought it could have been, that doesn't change how it was still a bad movie. Now, despite being based on the book by Crockett Johnson, it takes a lot of liberties with its feature-length adaptation. Basically, Harold is now an adult and his drawings are much more advanced, but one day the narrator of his world mysteriously disappears, so he and his friends Moose and Porcupine have to travel to the real world in order to find their old man. The biggest problem with Harold would have to be the writing, as like I expected from the advertising, it really feels like one of those generic fish-out-of-water movies from the 2000s with all the cliches you'd expect from one. It's about a cartoon character who's magically transported into the real world. He struggles to fit in, but later uses his skills to improve people's lives. One of his friends is separated from him early on and tries to find him, but they struggle to do so. The main character stays with a worrying mom and her kid whose dad recently died. There's a villain who wants to harness the main character's powers for his own benefit, and the list goes on. Not only is it not creative, but it's also boring as hell and largely unfunny. Granted, there were a handful of jokes that got a laugh out of me, but not enough for me to say that the humor overall was good. The acting was another area where Harold struggled. Zachary Levi was trying way too hard while Zooey Deschanel didn't try at all, not to mention all the other actors were just whatever with their performances. Thankfully, not all of this movie was bad, and there were a few things that I'd say it actually did well. For one, the 2D animation at the start of the film is just wonderful, and I wish it could have been entirely or even mostly animated because once we get to the real world, the sets, costumes, cinematography, VFX, and music we get are all really boring. I'll also admit that it does have a nice message about the importance of spreading positivity to other people's lives. It's not a message that you commonly see in kids' movies, so it's nice to see it here as it does give the film a bit of heart towards the end. Unfortunately, that's not enough to save Harold and the Purple Crayon from being an overall forgettable experience. It's not the worst thing out there, especially compared to some of the other movies we got this year, but it's still a bad movie with lazy writing, bland visuals, and weak performances. Maybe young kids might be entertained by this, but otherwise I'd recommend waiting for this to come out on streaming if you're really curious. And if you're curious what my rating will be, well, it's a pretty easy 4 out of 10 if I do say so myself. Next time, I'll be talking about my last movie in the US for a while, Trap. And even though M. Night Shyamalan's recent track record hasn't exactly been the best, I honestly thought his latest film was pretty good. Anyways, thanks for watching this episode of Isaac Reviews 2024, subscribe for more videos like this, and I'll see you all later.